You gonna join me for this one? Oh my goodness.
Blondie loves They Live too. I think he's gonna sit in for this review. Mind the husky panting. Talking about They Live, 1988, John Carpenter science fiction classic, starring the hot rod. Had to wear his shirt today. Roddy Piper. And I've seen this one many, many times over the years. But what was different this time was that I watched it. Oh, I want to mention, by the way, if you want to go as John Nada for Halloween this year, all you need is a blue flannel shirt, which I almost wore for this review, but I figured I'd do the hot rod shirt instead, and sunglasses. So I don't know if these are exactly like the ones that Nada and Frank wear in the movie and all the other Resistance, but it seems pretty close to me. They're dirt cheap, and Spirit of Halloween Canada had them. So here you go. Check that out if you want to be one of the ones who aren't asleep and aren't obeying anymore. Bye, Blondie. Anyway, what was different about this viewing of They Live was that I watched it in 4K. So usually I'm not a big, it's not a big selling point for me. Blu-ray is more than enough for me. So always loved movies since I was a kid. Watched a bunch on VHS, then DVD came out, and wow, that looked fantastic. And then Blu-ray came out, and that looked a lot better than even DVD. And then when 4K started to roll out, I felt like a lot of the time it didn't do anything for me because it was detail overload. Too much action, too much. It's kind of like when I first saw like 4K football on the TVs at stores like Walmart and Best Buy. It's too much detail, too much going on in the crowd, and just wasn't something I was a big fan of. Same went for movies. It just felt like detail overload. But I watched They Live in 4K because I read one of the reviews which said They Live has never looked better. Sometimes they're trying to clean something up that can't really be cleaned up just because of the film that was used, the lighting conditions that were used, the budget, the cinematography. You can't polish a turd. But in this case, this is a John Carpenter movie, and John Carpenter is all about the fine attention to detail, the minutia, the nuance, and the subtlety. He's one of my absolute favorite directors. He's right up there with James Cameron. Cameron's career went, into the stratosphere. I feel like Carpenter should have went right there, right beside Cameron as well. I think Carpenter is just as brilliant a director as James Cameron was. Carpenter's often called the master of horror, but I think They Live is proof that he wasn't just all about horror. I mean, there's creepy parts about They Live, but just a fantastic director who really understood how to draw you into a story, at making things atmospheric. My goodness, The Thing is one of the most atmospheric movies ever made. It's all about the paranoia, the fear you don't see in The Thing. Thing is always the top on my list. And then I would say Big Trouble in Little China, Escape from New York, and then I always considered They Live, about the third or fourth place of the Carpenter greatest of all time movies, and I often call it Carpenter's last great movie. Watching this in 4K has changed that a little bit. So I still feel the same way about 4K with a lot of movies that are just detail overload. It's just too much going on all at the same time. And I personally, when I'm watching it, I just get drawn in too much onto little details and pulled away from the story that matters. Carpenter's style is so slow burn in this movie, all about detail and subtlety, that this is the best use I've seen of 4K for an old movie that's been remastered as 4K. And where the 4K really shines in this movie is Damage. So I remember watching the original VHS of They Live, and Roddy and Keith David, Nada and Frank, had their epic alley fight that everyone always talks about, the one that goes on and on and on, and it's the longest alley fight. It might have been the longest one in history. It might still be. I'm not sure. And watching the VHS afterwards, they go and they rent a hotel room to recover. And on the VHS, you couldn't really see any damage sustained from the fight. I didn't get to see this movie in the theater. I didn't even know Roddy Piper was in this movie. It's the funny thing. I was a huge Roddy Piper fan, and I distinctly remember seeing this poster hanging at Jumbo Video in Kitchener when I was growing up, and looking at it, and I didn't really know who John Carpenter was. I hadn't seen The Thing yet by 88, but looking at this and going, oh, that looks like a creepy horror movie. Interesting. I had no idea that's Roddy Piper's eye. No idea. If I had known, I would have rented it on the spot, probably wore it out. But it wasn't until a little while later that I found out Roddy Piper was in that movie called They Live, with the picture of the guy with the sunglasses. Like, oh my gosh, that's Roddy Piper's eye. So even though they had the big wrestling star Roddy Piper in this movie, it was cool that at the time they didn't really plaster his face all over the poster. It's not in giant letters, Rowdy Roddy Piper in, with a little John Carpenter's They Live. They played it cool. But back to the 4K detail in this movie. So watching the VHS, you don't really get to see all the cuts and bruises and stuff. Then I watched it on DVD, and I remember thinking, wow, they really beat the crap out of each other, because you can see like Piper's kind of swollen. I think they put gauze in his mouth, bruises and cuts. So that was the DVD. And then the Blu-ray, even more like, wow, they really went to town. And now watching the 4K, more detail than ever. So the post-fight is, to me, even funnier now, because like the makeup department really went all out with, like, you can see tons of bruising, little cuts, scratches that weren't visible before. And another one I never noticed before was after Roddy goes out the window, there is a shot of his face, and he's got tons of scrapes on his face. Was never able to see that before, but that's where the 4K in this movie really shines, I think. The damage that gets accumulated. So yeah, that fight is long, but I think what makes it really work for me, two reasons in particular, is the consequences of the fight. So it's not like they're just perfectly fine afterwards and it was all just, like a cartoon fight. They sustain tons of damage, and they have to stay and recuperate at a hotel, I think for a couple days or weeks maybe. Next time you see them, they're all healed up. So the fact that they went so all out on the makeup, and we've never been able to really appreciate the makeup department's efforts until the 4K, is one reason why the fight really works. And then the other reason the fight works so well is... So Roddy, the situation for people who haven't seen They Live is that the world has been taken over by evil rich aliens, and they look normal. Everything looks normal. You pick up a magazine or a newspaper, and you see a picture. It's no big deal. You put on these special sunglasses that are developed by the resistance, the human resistance. You put them on, and all of a sudden, the true subliminal messages behind everything placed by these evil aliens that have enslaved mankind is revealed. So you put the glasses on, and instead of a picture, it says obey or sleep. And also, you put them on, and some people look hideous. They're the aliens. They sound like normal people, but they look hideous. They're the creepy aliens, which are in the sunglasses right there. So the alley fight takes forever, and some people make a joke of it and talk about, oh man, that fight just never ends. The reason it works is because Nada, Roddy Piper's character, is trying to tell his new friend, Frank, played by Keith David, put them on and it'll reveal what's actually going on in the world. And Frank refuses. So things escalate. One of the things about the movie is that these aliens are actually encouraging hostility between people. And it's mentioned actually in the movie. There's quite a few spots in the movie that seem very relevant. I mean, it was relevant back then, and this movie seems even more relevant by today's standards. Roddy Piper once jokingly called this movie a documentary, and I think it might be becoming a documentary. But Roddy is trying to get Keith David's character to put the glasses on, and Frank refuses. I will not. So there's this hostility that's been building up. There's a lot of homelessness. Both of them are homeless in LA. And so a fight ensues. It's not that hard to believe that it would just kind of happen so quickly because everyone's on edge in this movie. It's crazy to think this was 1988 and everyone was so on edge. Like I said, it really seems very relevant by today's standards, where disproportionate response is wherever you go. It's like road rage is wherever you go. You bump into someone the wrong way, you look at someone the wrong way, and all of a sudden you get a 5-minute alley fight. So they start fighting and fighting and fighting, and all Nada wants is for Frank just put them on, and Frank refuses. He's drawn a line in the sand. No, I will not put your damn glasses on. And they fight and they fight and they fight. And the reason why it needs to actually be that long, that it's not just Roddy Piper has gone amok and choreographed a long wrestling match. No, the reason it works is because Frank represents the ones who are asleep. So the whole movie is riddled with subliminal messages that human beings are being given by these aliens to sleep. Stay asleep. Sleep. Obey. Don't question authority. No independent thought. And Frank is doing that. He's following his programming, hook, line, and sinker. And so the reason the fight needs to be that long is because it represents when people are that asleep or used to the routine. I think the scene is supposed to show you just how hard people will fight to not let go of what they're accustomed to. If it was a 30-second fight, boom, 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 put them on, wow, I can't believe what happened, what's going on with the world, it would hit totally differently than these guys trying to kill each other, and then finally Roddy just beats the ignorance out of him. Actually beats the ignorance out of him, sticks the glasses on his head, drags him out into the street, and then Frank can't deny what he sees. It's clear as day what's going on, but sometimes it takes those lengths in order to wake a person up. Talking about Roddy Piper's acting talent in this movie, when the discussion of greatest wrestlers turned actors gets brought up, I'll often bring up Roddy Piper. And some people get it. They're like, oh yeah, that's a good one. And then some people will laugh. And then I'll say They Live, and they'll be like, oh, okay. And I like to joke around a lot, but I'm dead serious when I say Roddy Piper in They Live is one of the greatest wrestler performances in a movie that I've ever seen. Roddy once described acting as, he described wrestling as explosion, acting as implosion. So when you're wrestling, it's similar to theater. The person in the back row, farthest away, has to be able to hear you, see what's going on. So a lot of exaggerated physical movements, which Roddy was great at in wrestling. Acting is implosion. 4K really shows you the nuance and the subtlety of Roddy Piper. Now, I already thought his performance in this movie was fantastic, but watching the 4K for the first time ever, seeing it in this amount of detail, really makes his performance even more impressive. Now, I didn't think I could be more impressed by Roddy Piper in They Live, but there are scenes where, I always say, like in the movie reviews on Armchair Directors, I implore the directors, let the actor act. If you got a great actor, let the actor act. Stop with all of the busyness, the shaky cam, this and that, and all the gaga. If you got a world-class actor, just let him act. You don't have to move the camera, pan it, tilt it, zoom it. Just let the actor act. He's the human special effect. And there's shots in this movie where, again, it's like I was talking earlier about all the damage I never noticed before in 4K. There's nuance and subtlety in Roddy Piper's performance I've never noticed before. These are the performances that really draw me in and make me, like Terry Funk said, make me believe it's real. And there's like little, just tiny little movements, twitches. It's a science. Acting is a science, on-screen camera acting. And it's shocking that Roddy Piper, with so few movies under his belt, They Live wasn't his first movie, but it was one of his first, that someone with so little on-camera movie experience was able to show so much restraint and not go all out. I mean, there's parts of the movie where he is Roddy Piper, where he's screaming and booming, and he's got the wild eyes and total Roddy Piper, the wrestling character moments in the movie. But then there's moments where it's just a still shot or a close-up, medium or a close-up on Roddy, and you think he's not doing anything, but if you watch very closely and you have the fortune to watch it in 4K, you can see like the slightest little eye twitch, the slightest little curl of the corner of the mouth, where you get that little hot rod smirk. All those little, just tiny, subtle things that you see in real life that make a science fiction movie that's quickly becoming a real life documentary. But these little subtleties that you normally only see in real life, because movies, TV is usually the big exaggerated stuff. Piper was an actor that understood the implosion of dramatic acting instead of the over-the-top explosion that some of them do. And that's what makes me want to believe, using like the X-Files line. These are the techniques in order to make what's supposed to just be an old B movie, a one and done, watch it and forget about it. So what gives it the replay value, gives it the things to appreciate and notice and discover upon subsequent viewings. And I've seen They Live tons and tons of times ever since I first learned that Roddy Piper was in They Live. And it's really impressive to be able to watch an old favorite, and instead of just, hey, it's in higher detail, it's in 4K, check it out, it's crisper and sharper. For a movie like They Live specifically, with a director like John Carpenter, what the higher resolution means is not just a cleaner picture. It doesn't just mean, hey, more detail. It's the things that these details do. And you get to see the brilliance of John Carpenter, which was always there from the start, but has never really been shown on home video properly. We're getting to see the effort that was always there from the start, but never got showcased. So that's a really cool thing about a movie like They Live in particular, by a director. It's a very special, unique director like John Carpenter in particular. So going forward, like Predator in 4K, I don't know if I really need to see that, because what's Predator in 4K going to be? It's going to be more sharper detail on the leaves in the jungle and the Predator himself and stuff like that. I can't think of a lot of my old favorite classics, like Star Wars in 4K. I would think sometimes it would go against the movie's benefit, because you could see, the seams. You can see some of the fakeness. Some things weren't intended to be in such high detail, so you'll be able to see how, certain sets. Oh, look, you can see now where that's fake, or where the joining seam is, or whatever, or the makeup. Like imagine if you watch some Star Trek Next Generation in 4K, if they were able to upscale that somehow, you would see. You don't want to see where the prosthesis, where the latex masks were blended into the person's face and stuff like that. But with They Live, it's not over the top on the detail. It's all about subtlety and nuance, and I think that's where 4K really shines with movies like that. Roddy Piper, if you want to watch an actor just be passionate and really care about what he's doing, that's this movie right here. Roddy Piper knew that this was his big break, and it's just so awesome to watch him care so much about this movie, put so much thought into the movie. Now, Carpenter movies are always well known for all these little details that he let the actors just incorporate into their characters. So you got a little bit of backstory, like the doctor in The Thing. What's with the nose piercing? Back in the early 80s, that just wasn't a common thing for a guy his age. It's just things that make you wonder. Roddy Piper or John Nada is wearing a wedding ring in this movie. Why? It's never explained, it's never touched on, but Roddy, he wanted to keep his wedding ring on in the movie, as a sign to his family that he was thinking about them while he was away filming this movie. But it adds something to the character of John Nada too. Is he a widow? I kind of lean towards Nada being a widow because Nada has nothing. Nada means nothing in Spanish. So this character has nothing. No home, no job, no prospects. And having the wedding ring on just kind of makes me wonder, did he even lose his wife? Or maybe she left him, still leaves him with nothing, right? And that gives the character another element, like a guy whose wife leaves him and keeps wearing the wedding ring out of devotion. Like, it just so much thought and discussion can spark from just one little decision of an actor deciding, I'm going to give this guy a wedding ring, and let the audience read into it. And then there's a dramatic scene between Frank and Roddy, where Roddy is recounting something from his childhood, or Nada is recounting something from his childhood. And that scene always makes me a little uneasy, because if you don't believe Roddy Piper was one of the best wrestlers turned dramatic actors, just watch that scene in They Live where he's talking about his dad. When he was 13 years old, his dad took a knife to him, and he ran away from home. Now, Roddy Piper ran away from home about that age, and he never went into the specifics, but it was alluded to some abuse happening in childhood. So it makes me uneasy listening to that scene, because Roddy delivers it so real, and it kind of feels like it's another one of those scenes where, did Carpenter just let him, give him free reign, share whatever story you want, to convey that this Nada character has taken a lot of abuse throughout his life, and he's done taking abuse. So yeah, that scene just kind of, it makes me feel sorry for the Nada character, and it really, my heart goes out to Roddy Piper the man, if that's what he went through, or something similar to it, and it's just delivered so real and so powerfully by a guy with not a lot of on-screen experience, and a guy who in his wrestling promos, he was one of the best wrestling promo guys ever, but he never delivered anything like that, with Mean Gene holding a microphone next to him. So it just seems like he went to a very real place to deliver that scene. And it also explains why, when he gets his hands on a gun in the movie, when we were watching it, my wife said, I love how he just starts shooting the aliens. There's no trying to reason with them. There's no trying to figure out where they came from, what they're up to. Is this all a big misunderstanding? Can we talk this? He just walks into a bank and starts shooting evil alien bankers. He goes straight to work. And that scene where he's talking about his childhood abuse, kind of, it makes sense, right? He's had it up to here, and he's not going to take it anymore. And it's because of that scene, it's more believable that this guy is just ready to go to war. He's just looking for a war to fight, and boy, did he ever find it. And finally, I want to close off by saying what made this movie really refreshing at the time, and still is, especially by today's standards, is that it was a one-off. So one and done. It didn't set up a big, long series. It would have been cool to see more They Live movies, especially with Nada and Frank. But unfortunately, they don't make it out of the movie, although my wife did bring up, she asked, did he die? And I said, well, yeah, that's the final scene is Nada flipping off the aliens, and he died because he got shot by a machine gun in the helicopter. But we never saw the death on screen. So, just because you can't bring someone back in a well-explained method doesn't mean you can't bring them back. So I guess we could have gotten more They Live movies. We never saw Frank killed either. We saw a gun go up to his head and we heard the gunshot, but I mean, there's bad explanations, you know, just because it's a bad explanation doesn't mean it's not an explanation as to how a character survived something. But I think this movie, it's better in the long run that they didn't make a, 6-movie series of They Live movies fighting the aliens. A big long series wouldn't have pulled down the quality of the first one. I mean, just look at Jaws. The first Jaws movie isn't worse because of all of the bad sequels that came after it. But I think the first one stays more special, more unique, since it's not part of a big long series that was a constant dip in quality. So that's another thing. It's not a big investment. They Live is just a one shot, and it'll leave you wanting more, which is why I've watched it so many times. And the great thing about They Live is that there's so much detail in it, there's so much nuance and subtlety that it stands up to repeated viewing, many repeated viewings. It's hilarious. It's written by John Carpenter, even though he didn't take the credit. Credit goes to Frank Armitage, but that's actually John Carpenter. The music is by John Carpenter. This guy used to do everything, and it's very subtle. The harmonica and the snapping. It's just like the rest of the movie. It's minimalistic, but it works very well. I took a crack at adding some tunes to the soundtrack as well. That's not to say my choices were better. They can both be good. So I just recently on my Instagram and Facebook there recut Nada Walking Into the Bank, and I put It's a Long Way to the Top If You Want to Rock and Roll by AC/DC, because there's a bagpipe solo in that song. So the bagpipes hit just as Nada's walking into the bank. Cut a few things out just to make everything fit, and I was actually really surprised to see Roddy Piper's official Facebook page shared that. So I'm glad that they enjoyed that. Roddy's family runs the Roddy Piper Facebook page, so I was really honored to see that they enjoyed that enough to share it on their page. So cheers for that. They Live on 4K. If you have never seen They Live, then definitely you're probably going to want to watch it in 4K for your first viewing. If you love wrestling, if you love the hot rod, if you have seen They Live a number of times, trust me, 4K, it's worth it. Even if you're not a 4K guy, hey, I'm not a 4K guy either, but this one really cleaned up very nicely, and I think the extra detail adds a lot to the feel, the atmospheric feel of the movie. So hunt down a 4K of it and check that out. Thanks for watching this review. Hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, Nerd Mistake.